All right, let's dive right in. We are literally in the grips of an unprecedented global oil crisis right now. And today, we're mapping out the massive, step-by-step geopolitical and economic chain reaction that is completely reshaping how energy actually moves around our planet. It's like a giant puzzle. We're going to track this crazy domino effect that kicked off with the US-Iran war and rippled all the way to a massive refinery in Nigeria.
To really wrap our heads around the sheer scale of this crisis, we've got to start with this number, 70%. Right now, nearly 70% of global oil demand, we're talking over 100 million barrels every single day, relies on just a few incredibly narrow maritime choke points. Think places like the Strait of Malacca and, of course, the Strait of Hormuz. And you know, this isn't just some abstract statistic. This massive reliance literally dictates the cost of almost everything you touch, buy, or consume.
So that brings us to the million-dollar question. What actually happens when the most important one of these maritime choke points just shuts down? It's a critical question, right? One that totally exposes the sudden fragility of our global logistics. And recently, well, we found out the answer the hard way.
Section 1. The US-Iran conflict ripples.
The rapid pace of this escalation has been, frankly, staggering. On February 28, 2026, we saw joint US and Israeli military strikes against Iran. Then, the very next month, in March, Iran retaliated by targeting commercial vessels transiting the Strait of Hormuz. The result of all this? By April 2026, transit through the strait plummeted to just 3.8 million barrels a day. To put that into perspective for you, in the first half of the previous year, that exact same waterway handled an average of 20.9 million barrels a day. That is a massive, massive volume of global energy, completely choked off in just a matter of weeks.
Moving on to Section 2, choking the Hormuz Strait. The physical reality out on the water changed almost overnight. Historically, we'd see about 138 commercial ships pass through here every single day, just a steady stream. But by March 7, 2026, the UK Maritime trade operations recorded exactly one commercial vessel, just one. 0 oil tankers. A route that normally carries a quarter of the world's seaborne oil just went completely dark.
Section 3. The hidden fuel crunch.
Now, this is a distinction that often gets totally lost in mainstream headlines, but it's absolutely vital for understanding the current market stress. Unprocessed crude oil, that's not what powers the global economy. You can't put crude in a tractor or a jet plane. It requires highly specialized refining throughput to actually become usable finished fuel. And when that massive flow of refined products from the Middle East was suddenly choked off, well, the market went into full-blown panic mode.
The market instantly flashed these severe warning signs of a structural fuel supply crunch. We're talking everything from limited refinery slack to incredibly fragile replacement logistics. In the US alone, get this, distillate stocks plunged by almost 5 million barrels in a single week. That dropped them well below normal seasonal ranges. We also witnessed intense conversion stress. Basically, that means refineries were struggling big time to keep up with the specific demand for middle distillates, even if the global raw crude supplies seemed, ostensibly manageable.
And this number right here just proves the sheer severity of the panic. $64.58 per barrel. That was the record prompt NYMEX crack spread in July 2026. A spread of this magnitude, it was basically a giant, flashing neon sign from the market screaming that finished products like diesel and jet fuel were suddenly vastly more valuable and way more scarce than their raw crude feedstocks.
Which leads us to Section 4, scramble for alternative supplies.
So, with the Middle East bottlenecked and usable fuels drying up, the logistical nightmare looked exactly like this. Step 1, avoid the Red Sea and the Strait of Hormuz entirely. Just stay away. Step 2, reroute ships the incredibly long way around Africa's Cape of Good Hope. And Step 3, absorb massive freight premiums. And guys, those premiums were just astounding. Rates for LR2 tankers traveling from Jubail to Rotterdam skyrocketed from around $50,000 a day to over $120,000 a day. The sheer panic to secure tonnage meant these exploded costs inevitably trickled right down to the fuel pump.
To make matters even worse, Europe was already in a pretty fragile state. Because of the earlier ban on Russian diesel, Europe had been relying heavily on much longer Asian supply chains. As maritime analytics expert Calvin Frage points out, sending Russian crude to India just to be refined and shipped back to Europe as a product adds a massive structural cost. Now throw the Middle East conflict into the mix, and even those expensive alternative routes were completely disrupted. Europe, and really the whole world desperately needed a new supplier.
Section 5. Dangote, the new alternative.
In a crazy twist of geopolitical timing, right as the global fuel crunch truly set in, the massive Dangote refinery in Lekki, Nigeria, officially reached its full operational capacity. 650,000 barrels per day, hit right in February 2026.
Let's look at how they responded to this crisis, because it's a real game changer. In the single month of April 2026 alone, the Dangote refinery exported a staggering 1.66 billion liters of refined petroleum products. I mean, that is roughly 55.4 million liters leaving the facility every single day. They stepped directly into the massive supply vacuum created by the conflict.
And the export data reveals a very deliberate strategy. They didn't just export raw crude. They intentionally pivoted to a max jet and middle distillate mode to supply exactly what the world was starving for. You've got 615 million liters of jet fuel, 534 million liters of diesel, and 513 million liters of gasoline. Literally overnight, they became an immediate and absolutely critical supply buffer for global industries.
As David Bird, the CEO of the Dangote refinery, put it, "We'll be making sure that we're not the supplier of last resort." And they for sure weren't. Because of this massive, swift pivot in April, S&P Global reported that Dangote actually became the world's single largest exporter of aviation fuel. They stepped up exactly when global aviation needed it the most.
Section 6. The new reality. We are witnessing a truly historic transition here. Nigeria has shifted from being structurally dependent on imported fuel into a major, stabilizing hub for the Atlantic Basin and beyond. They are now supplying the United States with gasoline. They're supplying Saudi Arabia, a traditional energy titan, with jet fuel. South Africa is negotiating 12-month supply contracts with them. And on top of all that, they're already planning a $10 billion expansion to push capacity to 1.4 million barrels per day. That would make it the largest refinery on the planet.
So we've seen how a conflict in a narrow strait can instantly choke off the global fuel supply. But we've also seen how quickly new titans, like the Dangote refinery, can rise up to fill the void. As these global trade routes permanently realign and new hubs emerge, we have to ask, is the era of the Middle East's total energy dominance actually coming to an end? It's a fascinating shift, and one we will absolutely continue to watch. Keep questioning the world around you.